I'd like to thank the organizers of the conference for, as I heard one presenter say yesterday, boy, they really put on a world-class conference here. He was from the other side of the continent, so it must be true. Well, I never thought that when I snuck into the field house 45 years ago, yesterday, to try and get a glimpse of JFK, that 45 years later I'd be here talking about research that, in a sense, was motivated by that experience. Just let me give you a little background of how that might have motivated me to end up with the research that I've done. My buddy and I left school from Grand Forks Central the morning that we knew Kennedy was going to be here, and probably about 9 o'clock we get to the edge of the large parking lot outside the football stadium. At that time it was a big grass field, it was used for athletics and so on. We saw 10,000 people, 10 deep, surrounded by a snow fence. As we got there, there were the biggest helicopters that I've seen land. Of course, I was 16, so everything looked bigger, right? And they're landing, and we're thinking, there's no way we're going to get close to JFK. But since we lived across the street, and I used to get kicked out of this building on a regular basis for trying to shoot pool in the basement when I was a kid and didn't have the student ID to go with it, we knew every building on campus like the back of our hand. So we make our way through the 10,000 people, and we get to the front door of the field house, and we see sharpshooters on the roof with like M14s, I believe at the time. And we're not seeing Kennedy, there's helicopters. We try the doors, and they're open, and there's nobody there. We walk through into the trophy lobby area. We know our way into the locker room. We act like we own the place. Instead of proceeding straight ahead through some doors leading onto the floor of the arena, we made our way up the back stairway, past some handball courts. You can't do it anymore. It's been all remodeled. By this time, we've gone through 3 sets of doors. We've got one more door to go. Not a soul in sight. We open this heavy steel door, and we peek in, and we see 12,000 people, maybe 15, because the floor is covered, and not a seat in sight. We scan, and we see 2 seats right in front of the podium. Those are our seats. Make our way through the crowd. Walk up to the 2 seats, and there's a Secret Service agent standing 3 feet in front of them. And it was obvious that that's what he was. He had a button, and you had to have the right color button that day, otherwise you were an imposter or maybe an assassin. I think it was a red button. And he didn't look at us. I mean, we're 16 years old. We're not. In those days, plastic explosives worn around your midsection was not a possibility. Didn't look at us. Sat down. Kennedy came in. The place went totally hysterical. The first 15 rows jumped onto their chairs, mostly co-eds. It's like the Beatles had come in, okay? And it subsided, and he got them quieted down, gave a speech, which, of course, at the time it didn't really register. I have read it many times since. And so that day passed, and it was an indelible experience. And I started paying, every once in a while there would be a lecture in this building about the assassination. Some researcher would be coming through, and so I was kind of paying attention. But I didn't really start doing a lot of reading for about 10 years, till about 25. Well, as things started to develop over the years, I started to wonder, why are there so many people involved in the assassination in terms of some kind of connection from North Dakota? Minnesota, I thought, was there a plot in North Dakota? And then I realized, like everybody from North Dakota thinks, so many people leave here, and so many become famous that they're bound to get involved in all kinds of things. I mean, John Tunheim is from Thief River Falls. Look how he's involved. He's one of the key players in trying to figure out what's going on. Wesley Liebler, one of the main legal counsels for the Warren Commission from Langdon, North Dakota. Flint Hill, you see jumping in the back of the limousine from Washburn, North Dakota, went to Concordia and Moorhead. A guy named Jack Peterbottle from, I believe, Cambridge, Minnesota, was the advance man for the parade route in Dallas. Lee Harvey Oswald was living here for a while, and John and I have done research that is kind of maybe going to overlap today, but I'll include Lee Harvey Oswald in that list of people. And then there's one more that I won't mention until later. So in the January and March 2000 issues of a journal at the University of New York called The Fourth Decade, we described 2 Lee Harvey Oswald appearances in North Dakota. And in November of 1998, I'm standing in a Schindler's bookstore, magazine store in Minneapolis, and there's a Dallas monthly magazine, like Twin Cities Monthly. And there's a cover story on the 35th anniversary of the assassination. And it has Mrs. Connolly and a number of people in Dallas and Texas who were involved with the incidents in Dallas. And the story was, do we still care? Well, I picked up the magazine and scanned it. It was interesting. It was all done in black pages with white script. And I ran across a paragraph that indicated that a woman living in Stanley, North Dakota in 1953 had a son by the name of William Timmer, and she wrote to LBJ in 1963, just after the assassination, and she said, my son was a playmate of Lee Harvey Oswald in Stanley, North Dakota in 1953. Well, I didn't know what to think of it, but I started to do a little digging, and one thing led to another, and John and I find ourselves in Stanley, North Dakota, talking to everybody we could, and John will go into more detail about how we found a second Lee Harvey Oswald event in Stanley, North Dakota. So now we had 2 people independently saying that they had an experience with Oswald in 1953 and 1956. We didn't know what to think. I mean, it was like entering the Bermuda Triangle for a while. Well, there seemed to be an unusual number of coincidental connections of people, organizations, and occurrences in North Dakota history that may relate to the events of 1963. Is there a connection between a man named Richard Case Nagel's account of a 1963 JFK assassination attempt, the letter from the lady in Stanley, North Dakota to LBJ in December of '63, and a reporter for UPI by the name of Aline Mosby, who produced the first release about Oswald's defection to the Soviet Union. So these 3 events seem to be related as we proceeded in our search. And the interesting thing about Elaine Mosby, she's a UPI correspondent in Moscow, and she is given by the American Embassy the first opportunity to go talk to Oswald. She's told that he's living at the Metropole Hotel, that he has just tried to defect, and she's free to go talk to him. She does. Make a long story short, in the process of the interview and her memo that she sends to Washington the following Monday morning to UPI and to the FBI, she recounts that Oswald said that when he was a young man living in Manhattan, he received a pamphlet about communism from a woman in New York City. And he said, then we moved to North Dakota. And in North Dakota, I found a book in the library called Das Kapital, and that's when I was like a man who had just opened the Bible for the first time, and I became interested in Marxism. Well, that did not compute. Well, critics will say that there was a typo, that when he said North Dakota, what he actually said was New Orleans, and it became a typo. In the process of transcription, it turned from N-O to N-D. And that has created, for John and I, a cottage industry in trying to understand Boswell's relationship to North Dakota.